So I'm going to do a series about ideas for standing out in the interview by demonstrating what you know about the employer. So this is the first one, and it's to read a report by the employer, but it has to be something in depth, like the chief economist's economic forecast. Maybe there's an industry report on the latest developments that actually could be written outside the company, but something that mentions the company or one of their products. Or it could be a white paper or a case study on how an employer is addressing a particular need or situation, but something that's in depth and takes a while to read. And then in the interview, if you haven't been able to work it into the conversation during the interview, at the end, when they say, do you have any questions? You could say, I was reading the chief economist's economic forecast, and I thought that the assumptions he was making about interest rates were really aggressive. I'm curious about your thoughts on that. And also, when a report like this comes out, is there any kind of in-house discussion forum about it? So right there, you are distinguishing yourself by doing some very specific in-depth research that most people won't be doing. So this is the second part in the series of ideas for how to stand out in the interview by demonstrating what you know about the employer. And this one has to do with watching videos. So watch an interview of the CEO or another senior leader, and it can't be a short one. It has to be an in-depth one, like maybe it's a half an hour or 45 minutes or longer. So it can be on YouTube. It could be something you find on online. Make sure it's real. It could be on a show like 60 Minutes, or maybe it's even an in-person event that you attended. Pick a specific topic that the person discusses and do some research on that. And then in the interview, say, a few months ago, I heard Bob Jones, the CEO, interviewed in depth on 60 Minutes and was intrigued with his discussion about diversifying the supply chain for ACE's medical equipment manufacturing arm. And I was curious about the timetable on that and whether you've already seen changes in how some of the components are sourced. So again, you're doing something very specific and in-depth that most people are not going to do, and that will make you stand out. So this is part 3 of the series of ideas for how to stand out in the interview. And this one is directly from Michael Neese, who is a 20-year expert on interviewing, and he's the creator of Interview Mastery. You can check that out. Michael was our second 321 I Relaunch podcast guest out of almost 300 episodes. We'll put the link in the notes, but his advice is, if you're interviewing with a public company, to look at the company's 10K, their annual report, and specifically Section 1A, which is risk factors. And then in the interview, you could say, I noticed in your 10K that currency fluctuations in the European Union is a concern, and I want to know if you can share your perspective on that. Right away, you're going to be citing something and talking about something that most interview candidates will not have done, and that's another way to stand out.